Hey Rockets! All right, last lesson of the week. We're looking at lesson 12, where we're going to construct the coordinate plane. You'll notice I'm going to go through two sections, 12.1 and 12.2, out of your math workbook. Um, it does suggest having some graph paper if you happen to have any available. It's not mandatory, but it might come in handy when you get to the practice problems if you have some. And Oh, I just realized I accidentally deleted it. Practice problems 2 and 3 are the ones that we want you guys to focus on. I deleted that on accident a minute ago. All right. So one other thing really quick before I get into the lesson, I have a tab open here called Math Dictionary for Kids. Um, my homeroom team, I have suggested all year long that they add this as a bookmark, and I would recommend it for any other students as well. It shows things in very kid-friendly language, and there's always visuals to go along with. So I've got it clicked on axis right now, which is a word we're going to be focused on. But there's been so much vocabulary embedded in the math we've been doing. You were talking about inequalities, or we were doing inequalities just a couple days ago, and I can look and find an example and some visuals, and then there's even like this little next, it'll give you several other things to work with. So a math dictionary for kids, highly recommend that you bookmark this and use it if there's anything you're not sure what they're asking you to use or do. All right, there's my random little plug. This is a different lesson that I never closed. Save. And the lesson I want is down here somewhere. Hiding behind this thing. There it is. All right. Thanks for being patient. So here we are at lesson 12. And in this lesson, we've got a set of data. And we're going to look at which set of axes we would choose to represent the data in this table. So let's look at this. The following data were collected over one December afternoon in England. This data includes time in hours and temperature in degrees Celsius. So I'm going to highlight really quick these temperature and time. It's important that we know what our labels are when we are going to be asked about axes, because those dark lines, the axis or axes on a graph, need to be labeled appropriately. So that's what we're paying most attention to today. So I'm going to notice a couple things. Well, as we look at the time, I guess maybe I should have used a different color for that. The time, we go from time afternoon. So if it's 0 hours afternoon, that must be noon, 12 o'clock. Then afternoon, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So those are our times. Then when we look at our temperatures, however, we'll notice that we start out at 5 degrees Celsius, and it looks like we pretty steadily drop down there into the negatives, ending at -4 degrees Celsius. So just kind of paying attention to the types of numbers, the sizes of the numbers, and then what those labels are going to come in handy here. So, all right. We're choosing a set of axes. Now, this is a little unusual. We have A, B, and C. I'm kind of scanning across. We have 3 separate graphs to choose from. We're not plotting anything here, at least not yet. We're just picking which graph would be easiest to plot these points on. So graph A here, I see that we still have temperature and time, hours and Celsius, so the labels look good. And if I look at the numbers they're using, my times go from 0 at the origin to 9. My temperatures go from 0 at the origin to 5, or well, 6 isn't labeled, but there's another line where we could go 6. So I'm going to look at what the other ones have to offer here. Now, this one's definitely a much tinier grid that they've used. I still see time in hours, afternoon, temperature in Celsius, labels look good. But now if I look at the numbers, I'm going from 0 to 10 in my hours and 0 to 8 or 9 in my temperature. And then finally, choice C, if I can scroll, too far. There she is. Choice C, same labels again, which is a good thing. So that doesn't want to draw. Let's try this again. Here it goes. Time in hours, temperature in degrees Celsius, but looking at those numbers, now our hours go from 0 to 40, and our temperature goes from 0 up to 30. So bigger squares in that grid and also larger numbers going with that. Well, only one of these is going to be our best case scenario here. And when I look back at the number sets that we've got, I noticed that the time goes from 0 to 8. So if I scroll back down here again, come on. All right, time. That's at the bottom. From 0 to 8. Well, that goes from 0 to 8 there. So that one looks okay time-wise. This one also goes, sorry guys, this does not like me. That goes at least 0 to 8 in the time there. So that one still looks good. And well, that one goes from 0 to 40. That seems a bit extensive when our highest number was 8. So C doesn't look great based on that bottom part, but we'll double check with the other axes and just kind of verify. So temperature, we've got a high of +5 and a low of -4. All right, so first graph that we have as an option, graph A, I see 5. However, we don't have any negative temperatures available, and we've got temperatures in the data that dip below 0. So A is not looking good. B, however, this grid line, when I looked at it the first time, I failed to notice that it does in fact go into those negative numbers. So not only does this have the time broken down in increments or intervals that would be appropriate for getting up to 8, but our temperature is broken into smaller increments because we're working with single digit numbers, and it goes into the negative. So B is definitely going to be the best choice for us to plot these data points if we needed to do so. So as I scroll down to see what our next step is, once we can identify what is our best choice for a grid, now we've got some sets of coordinates, and we're told to draw and label our directions here. Come on, highlighter, work. Draw and label an appropriate pair of axes and plot the points. Now, the one that worked out best for us a moment ago, B here, dropped down into the negative and had small increments because of the numbers that we had in the data. So this time, we're going to use the numbers that we've been given in our data to determine how we should set this up. So I'm noticing our x coordinates, which are the first coordinates. All right, come on. So 1 is an x coordinate, 3, -5, and 0 are the x coordinates. So x coordinates. Use my pen here instead. x, because remember, x comes first in that ordered pair. So now our y coordinates are going to be those second numbers. So 2, -4, -2, and 2.5. So when we look at our x and y and how we want to break these down, I'm noticing that the y coordinates, those second numbers within each set, in each ordered pair, the lowest number I see here is -4. The highest value I see is a positive 2.5, so not huge numbers there. The x coordinates, the smallest one I see is -5, the largest one I see is +3. Again, we're working in a pretty small range of numbers here, numbers that are all pretty close to 0. So I don't think we need to count by 5s or 10s or anything like that. I think if we just simply count by 1s, we're going to be able to find those locations on that grid. So let's highlight some axes here. All right, y is vertical, so I'm going to put a vertical axis line. I'm just going to trace down there. And our horizontal or x-axis, I'm going to put that through here. Since we do have some negative numbers, I want to make sure that I can see at least part of all 4 quadrants here. And then I'm going to go ahead and plot those points. If I did this well, then I should be able to plot all of these points. So my first point is at 1, 2. So +1, +2, meaning that intersection right there would be the first point. See if I can erase just the black lines. Ah, darn it, I was afraid that was going to happen. Bloop. So we've got the first point done. Our second point, 3, -4. Okay, 1, 2, 3, -4. So down 1, 2, 3, 4. That's our second point, sitting right at that intersection. I'm trying to draw a dot. Yeah, that's a dot. We'll pretend that's a dot. And erase my kind of thinking hops here because those aren't actually, it's gonna erase the axis. Darn it, keeps erasing my axes. So my second point, so far so good. We've been able to put all these things on the grid like we need to. -5, -2. All right, that third point. Starting at the origin, at the intersection where they cross, -5, -1, 2, 3. Shoot, I just found an error in my grid and where I made this. So we were told to draw and label an appropriate axes. Well, I've got to go further in the negative than I have room to do. So I'm actually going to erase everything I had on that grid so far because I just found that my grid actually wasn't the best. Now, we seem to be doing okay as far as our vertical up and down, but I didn't have enough room to the left. So I'm going to recreate that, putting our y-axis, our vertical axis, more toward the center, since I've got some numbers that go a little bit deeper into the negatives. I've got that -5 point there. And hopefully I can plot that point now. So it was this third point that I was unable to plot a moment ago. So let's try it now. If I start at the axis, or excuse me, at the origin and go -1, -2, -3, -4, there's -5. My second coordinate, -2, so I'm going to go down 1 and 2. And now that I've moved that axis, I will be able to plot that third coordinate pair or ordered pair there. So that's the third one. So ABC, I'm going to call that like point C there. And sure enough, it will work. And it's working when I count everything by ones. So if I were to label these, I would label this -1, -2. This is really hard to do by hand, -3, 4, and so on. And I'm counting by ones in the vertical direction as well. So above that origin, above that x-axis, I'd be counting positives, and below it, I'd be counting negatives. So when I label this, which you can probably do easier with pencil than I can on the touchscreen. You'd be positive 1, 2, 3, and so on. Below it would be -1, -2, and so on. Okay, hopefully that makes sense as far as paying attention to the increments, big or small, and paying attention to do we need the negative quadrants? Do we only need the positive? Are all of our numbers positive? Are all of our numbers negative? So kind of seeing, do we need 4 quadrants? Do we only need 1 or 2 of those? And thinking about where to locate those points. If you have any questions, get with one of us math teachers. We miss you. See you next week. Bye.